doesn't have any fertility in it, so it's very, very poor. You don't really find serious plants. Plants don't really survive on sandy soil, but plants can still manage to survive on clay soil. So clay soil is a fertile soil compared to sandy soil. Then sandy soil is dry and warm, while the clay soil is wet and cold. So those are the differences you can find between a sandy soil and a clay soil. Functioning ecosystem. Like I said earlier, that the ecosystem is made up of two components, the biotic and the abiotic components. And the biotic, I said, they are the living components of the environment, which are the plants and the animals, while the abiotic components are the non-living components, and they include temperature, wind, rainfall, light intensity, salinity, pH, and the likes. So biotic factors don't just stay on their own, and abiotic factors stay on their own. They interact. The biotic and the abiotic components of the environment, they interact. They are linked by a variety of processes. So we want to look at the processes whereby the biotic and the abiotic components of the environment are linked together. And I will be first of all talking about them in relation to their nutrition. I said that nutrition is one of the characteristics of living things, if you remember very well. So nutritionally, plants and animals are classified, or organisms generally are classified into two groups according to their feeding patterns. We classify organisms into two groups. We have the autotrophs and the heterotrophs. Autotrophs and heterotrophs. What are autotrophs? Autotrophs are generally green plants, and they manufacture their own food from simple inorganic compounds, CO2 and water, in the presence of the sunlight. They are also known as primary producers. They have the ability in them to manufacture their own food. So they are the ones that you find at the base or at the first level of the food chain. You get to know what food chain is as we move on in the class. But autotrophs, how is at the back of your mind, they are generally green plants, and they manufacture their own food by themselves in a process called photosynthesis. But heterotrophs, in the other hand, heterotrophs cannot produce their own food. They cannot manufacture their own food. Hetero means different, multiple. So they feed on complex compounds from the tissue of biotic organisms in their environment. They feed on any other thing they can lay their hands on. They don't manufacture their food, so they are dependent. And that is why I said autotrophs are primary producers. Why heterotrophs? They are primary consumers. They don't produce, so they consume. Then heterotrophs include all animals. Animals generally are heterotrophs. They don't manufacture their food on their own. They have to depend on plants and other animals around. Then we have carnivorous plants. There are some plants that they feed on animals, so they don't produce their own food. Then we have fungi and bacteria. They don't manufacture their food too, so they have to be dependent. And I said they are consumers. I want to talk about trophic level. Trophic level is a position or a successive level an organism occupies in a food chain. The position or the status, simply put, of an organism in a food chain is what we call the trophic level. The level of an organism, but according to feeding pattern now. The trophic level is the feeding status of an organism in a food chain. And we have various trophic levels. We have the first trophic level, which is also called the energy level. It is the lowest level. We have the second, the third, and the fourth level. Also, we have the last level, which is occupied by decomposers or transformers. So we have 5 levels, 5 trophic levels. You get to know the organisms that are on each level. But I said it's a position, a status, a nutritional status of an organism in a food chain, in an environment. That's what the trophic level is. We have the first trophic level, which is the lowest. It's also called the energy level. The second, the third, the fourth, and the decomposers or transformers level. The first trophic level. The first trophic level consists of green plants. The first trophic level is occupied by growing plants, and they are autotrophs. So they are the ones that start the food chain. They manufacture their own food. Through the help of the solar energy, that is the energy from the sun, they convert chemical solar energy into chemical energy, and chemical energy is basically food or fuel. So they convert the solar energy into chemical energy during photosynthesis. That is with the help of chlorophyll. That's a component they have. In the presence of sunlight, water and CO2, they are able to manufacture their own food. And the first trophic level, like I said earlier, is the energy level, because they are the one that actually manufactures the food. So they are called the manufacturers or the primary producers. Now, second trophic level. The second trophic level is occupied by herbivores. What are herbivores? Herbivores are plant eaters. Plants, vers, eaters of plants. So herbivores are plant eaters, and they occupy the second level. They convert food produced by green plants into flesh when they eat them, and they are known as primary consumers. They are the first that eat the plants. Plants are primary producers. So the second trophic level, you have herbivores, animals that eat plants. So they eat what is in the first trophic level. Then the third trophic level is occupied by carnivores. Those are flesh eaters. They eat the herbivores. I said the second level has the herbivore. Herbivores eat the autotrophs in the first trophic level, while the third level is composed of carnivores, and carnivores eat the herbivores. The fourth level, we have tertiary consumers there. They are the secondary carnivores that eat the primary carnivores. Then we have the composers and transformers. That's the last level. They consist of organisms such as the fungi, the bacteria, and they break down consumers and producers to release compounds. They decay the consumers and the producers. They work on them to decay it. So they work on dead producers. They work on dead plants and animals. So they recycle the nutrients. When the animal is dead or the plant is dead, they work on it. The bacteria and fungi work on it. They feed on it, and in the process of feeding on it, they decompose it. That makes it in form of compost, and they are able to recycle the nutrients and make them available to the producers in terms of nutrients for the plants. So moving on, I'll be talking about the food chain. So I'm trying to join everything together now. So we talk about the autotrophs and the heterotrophs and the trophic level. So I want to bring everything together in a place that you easily understand what I'm saying. Food chain is a linear feeding relationship among organisms in a natural community involving the transfer of food energy from plant through a series of organisms eating each other. That is, the one will eat the preceding one. When I was illustrating the food chain, I said the primary consumers, they are the ones that occupy the first level. So, and I said herbivores occupy the second level. So herbivores will eat the plants, then carnivores in the third trophic level will eat the herbivores. So it continues the linear feeding arrangement whereby one organism eats the preceding one is what we call food chain. Now look at this example. This is a typical example of a food chain. You find the green plants, the grasshopper, the lizard, and the snake. So we want to look at how this example affects or is related to what I've been saying since. You see, the green plant is the primary producer, and it is the one that occupies the first trophic level. It's the autotroph also. Then that is the energy level. I said the green plants are majorly found at the energy level. Then the grasshopper. The grasshopper is an herbivore. It eats plants. So it is an herbivore. And it's also the primary consumer in this because it's the first that consumes the green plants. Also, the lizard. The lizard is a carnivore. But because it's the first carnivore that eats the grasshopper, that is why we call it primary. Primary is like the first, like you went to primary school, that's the first school you went to, then secondary school, then you have the tertiary. So in relating it to it like that, we represent first by primary, second by secondary, then third by tertiary before we move on like that. So the grasshopper eats the green plants, then the lizard in turn eats the grasshopper, while the snake eats the lizard. In this illustration, you will find out that the green plant is the producer, the grasshopper is the primary consumer or the herbivore, then the primary carnivore or the secondary consumer is the lizard, while the snake is the consumer. It's also a consumer, but now the third consumer, that's why we call it the tertiary consumer. Then we have it also being the secondary carnivore. So this is an example of a typical food chain. Look at this other example. This is an example of an aquatic food chain. That is the food chain you find in water bodies. You have the algae at the producer level, is the producer, and it's also at the energy level. Then you have periwinkle. The periwinkle is the primary consumer or the herbivore because it eats a plant. Then you have the crab. The crab is the secondary consumer or the primary carnivore. Then the seagull, which is the last on that chain, is the tertiary consumer or the secondary carnivore. So this is a typical example of